Jake Morrison watched his daughter Emma play in the observation deck of the starship Starfall, and felt his heart fill with warmth. The little girl was 6 years old, with bright green eyes that came from her elven mother, and the stubborn chin that definitely came from him. She had pointed ears like Lirelei, but they were smaller, and her hair was brown instead of silver. The ship moved through space toward their next mission on a planet called Zarian 7. Jake worked as a scientist studying dangerous worlds while Lirelei worked as the ship's navigator. Their love had surprised everyone when it first began. 3 years ago, humans and elves barely spoke to each other, and mixed relationships were almost unheard of, but Jake and Lirelei had found something special. Together, Rima ran over to him with a datapad in her small hands, showing pictures of the planet they were approaching. It looked dark and angry, with red storms covering most of the surface. "Daddy, why does this world look so scary?" Emma asked, while climbing onto his lap. Jake hugged her close and smiled. "Some worlds are just different, sweetheart. This one has big storms and strange animals, but we study them to learn how life can survive in hard places. Will we go down there?" Emma wanted to. No, little one," Jake said quickly. "This planet is too dangerous for people like us. We just watch from the ship and send robots down to look around, Commander." Zara Velter walked into the room, and Jake felt the mood change. The Vordan alien was tall, with blue skin and cold yellow eyes. She always made it clear that she thought Emma should not exist. The commander believed that mixing species was wrong and dangerous. "Morrison, we need to talk," Zara said without even looking. Adimajik kissed his daughter's forehead. "Go find your mother, Emma. He'll be right back." The little girl ran off toward the navigation room, where Lirelei worked. Jake followed Zara to the command center, where several other crew members waited. The mood felt heavy and wrong. "We have a problem," Zara announced. "The plasma storm around Zarian 7 is much worse than we thought. Our shields took damage when we got close, and now the ship has serious problems." "How serious?" Jake asked, though he already feared. "The answer: life support is failing. In most sections we have maybe 6 hours before the air runs out. The escape pods can hold 20 people, but we have 24 crew members on board." Jake felt his blood turn cold. "What are you saying? Someone needs to stay behind," Zara said with no emotion in her voice. "We need to decide who." The room fell silent. Jake looked around at faces he had worked with for years. Some looked away, others stared at the floor. One person spoke up. "The child should stay," said Dr. Helen Wright, an older human woman. "She does not contribute to the mission, and takes up resources." Jake felt rage explode in his chest. "You cannot be serious. Emma is just a child. She is not fully human or fully elf." Commander Voss added. The Centauri officer had never liked mixed species relationships. "She does not belong in either society." Jake stepped forward, his hands shaking with anger. "You will not touch my daughter." "Calm down, Morrison," Zara said. "We need to think about this logically. The child represents the least valuable crew member. From a mission standpoint." Lirelei entered the room at that moment. Her silver hair was pulled back, and her beautiful face looked worried. "What is happening here?" "They want to leave Emma behind," Jake said, his voice breaking. "They want to abandon our daughter on a death." Worldly Ral went very pale and grabbed onto a chair for support. "That cannot be true. No one would suggest such a thing. The votes have been counted," Zara announced. 20 crew members voted to save themselves, voted to save the child. Jake looked at Lirelei, waiting for her to speak, waiting for her to stand up for their daughter. But she just stood there with tears running down her face. "Lirelei," Jake whispered, "you voted. I had to choose," she said so quietly he could barely hear her. "I had to choose between Emma and everyone else. I could not let all these people die." The words hit Jake like a physical blow. His own partner, the mother of his child, had voted to abandon Emma. The woman he loved had chosen to save strangers instead of her own daughter. "You have 30 minutes to say goodbye," Zara said. "The storm is getting worse, and we need to launch." Sanjake ran from the room, his heart breaking into pieces. He found Emma in their quarters, packing her favorite stuffed animal into a small bagger. "We going somewhere, Daddy?" she asked with innocent eyes. Jake knelt down and pulled her into his arms. "Emma, listen to me very carefully. I need you to be very brave. The ship has problems, and we need to go to the surface of the planet. Will you come with me?" she asked. Jake felt tears start to fall. "I will try, sweetheart. I will try very hard to come with you." They took Emma to the escape pod bay, where one small pod had been prepared with extra food and water. Jake held his daughter tight while the crew loaded her few belongings. The pod was designed for emergency landings and had basic survival equipment to let appeared at the last moment, looking broken and lost. She tried to touch Emma, but the little girl pulled away. "Are you doing this to me?" Emma asked. Her young voice cut through everyone like a knifeful relay. "Started crying harder, but could not," answered Jake, carried Emma to the pod, and strapped her into the safety seat. He kissed her forehead and whispered, "I love you, Emma. Never forget that Daddy loves you more than anything in the universe will." "I see you again?" she asked. Jake could not speak. He just nodded and stepped back. As the pod sealed shut, the crew watched through the viewing window as the small pod launched toward the angry red planet below. Jake pressed his hands against the glass, trying to see his daughter for as long as possible. The pod disappeared into the storm clouds and was gone to crew. Members grabbed Jake when he tried to follow Emma to the surface. They sedated him and carried him to another escape pod as he screamed his daughter's name. The last thing Jake saw before losing consciousness was Zarian 7 growing smaller in the distance. His little girl was down there alone, on a world that killed everything that tried to live on a dwin. Jake woke up. They were aboard a rescue ship heading back to human space. Emma was gone. The crew told him she had died on impact, that no one could survive on such a dangerous world, but Jake knew the truth. His daughter was alive somewhere on that hell planet fighting to survive, while the people who should have protected her flew away to safety. The betrayal burned in his heart like poison. He had lost everything that mattered, and the galaxy would pay for what it had done to his child. 3 months passed since Jake Morrison returned to Earth, but he had not really returned at all. His body sat in the small apartment in New Angeles, but his mind stayed on Zarian 7 with Emma. Every night he dreamed of his daughter fighting strange creatures in red storms. Every morning he woke up screaming. Her name Darlisa Kane came to visit him twice a week. She was a kind woman who tried to help people deal with terrible losses, but Jake did not want help. He wanted his daughter back. "You need to eat something, Jake," Lisa said, while placing food on his table. "The reports say Emma died instantly in the crash." She did not suffer. Jake stared at the wall where he had hung pictures of Emma laughing and playing. The official reports were lies. He knew Emma was alive because he could feel her in his dreams. She was scared and hungry, but she was fighting. She was surviving. Lisa tried again. The coalition did everything they could, Jake. There was no way to mount a rescue mission to Zarian 7. No one can live on that planet for more than a few days. "Then how do you explain the military research?" Jake asked. Suddenly Lisa looked confused, so Jake continued. "I have been reading about Project Deathworld. The military has been sending soldiers to dangerous planets for years. They modify people to survive impossible places. That research is classified," Lisa said carefully. "How did you learn about it?" Jake laughed, but there was no happiness in the sound. "I used to be a respected scientist, Lisa. People still owe me favors. I have been learning about genetic modification, combat drugs, and survival enhancement. The military has created super soldiers who can live on worlds that would kill normal humans. You cannot be thinking of modifying yourself," Lisa said, with growing alarm. "Jake, that research is experimental and dangerous. Most test subjects die or go insane." Jake stood up and walked to his computer terminal, where data files covered the screen. Medical procedures, equipment, lists, and biological enhancement protocols filled every folder. He had been studying for months, learning everything he could about turning a normal human into something that could survive on Deathworld's eye. "I'm going back for Emma," Jake said simply. "The galaxy abandoned my daughter, but I will not. I am going to become something that can survive on Zarian 7, and I am going to bring her home." Lisa tried to stop him, but Jake had already started the process. He had stolen medical equipment from research facilities and purchased illegal drugs from underground sources. The first treatments were simple hormone boosters and muscle enhancers that military pilots used. The changes started small. Jake could run longer without getting tired. His reflexes became faster. His vision improved in low light, but he needed more. He needed to become something that could survive plasma storms and fight alien predators at Morel. Maya Cross contacted him after he broke into a military research facility. She was an older woman with gray hair and cold eyes who ran secret operations for Earth Defense Force. You have been making noise in places you should not be. Morrison, she said, during their meeting in an abandoned warehouse. I could have you arrested for theft and espionage. Jake stared at her without fear. I am going to get my daughter back. Admiral, you can help me or get out of my way. Cross smiled, but it was not a nice smile. What if I told you there was a way to get what you want and serve humanity at the same time? She explained about black operations missions to Deathworlds, where normal soldiers could not survive. The military needed people who could operate in impossible environments. Jake would get the resources and training he needed in exchange for completing dangerous missions. Jake agreed immediately. He did not care about serving humanity, he only cared about Emma. But if the military could make him into something that could survive on Zarian 7, he would do whatever they asked. The real modifications began at a secret facility in the Australian outback. Dr. Helen Reed was a brilliant but disturbing woman who specialized in human enhancement. She had created soldiers who could survive in space without suits and fighters who could breathe underwater. Your daughter is probably dead, Reed told Jake during his first procedure. But if you want to join her on that hell planet, I can make it possible. Jake lay on the medical table while machines pumped new chemicals into his blood. His bones were reinforced with metal. His organs were replaced with synthetic versions that could process toxins and survive extreme temperatures. His nervous system was rewired to handle pain and stress that would break normal minds. Each procedure hurt worse than the last. Jake screamed as his body was torn apart and rebuilt. His skin became thicker, his muscles grew stronger, his blood carried more oxygen. But the worst changes happened in his mind. The treatments made him think differently. Emotions became distant except for his love for Emma and his growing hatred for everyone who had abandoned her. He stopped caring about other people except as tools to help him reach his goal. Issa tried to visit him at the facility, but Jake refused to see her. He had become something she would not recognize. His body was covered in scars from the surgeries. His eyes had turned cold and predatory. He could break steel with his bare hands and survive in environments that would kill normal humans instantly. The military tested their new weapon on smaller death worlds. Jake completed missions that should have been impossible. He walked across planets covered in acid rain, fought creatures that could tear apart armored vehicles, and survived in places where the air itself was poison. Each successful mission brought him closer to getting the resources he needed to return to Zarian 7, but each mission also took away more of his humanity. Jake Morrison, the loving father, was disappearing. Jake Morrison, the living weapon, was taking his place. After 6 months of modifications and training, Jake barely looked human anymore. His body was larger and stronger. His movements were too fast and too precise. His smile never reached his eyes. The other soldiers were afraid of him. Admiral Cross watched him during combat training, where Jake fought 3 enhanced soldiers at once, and won without getting seriously hurt. You have become exactly what we needed, Morrison, she said. But are you still human enough to complete your real mission? Jake looked at her with eyes that had seen too much death. I am whatever I need to be to get Emma back. If that means becoming a monster, then I will be the best monster you have ever created. But Jake had started to wonder if Emma would even recognize him when he found her. He had become something that might scare her instead of comfort her. The man who had read her bedtime stories was gone, replaced by something designed for killing and surviving. Still, he continued the treatments, because stopping meant giving up on Emma, and Jake would rather die than abandon his daughter the way everyone else had. The galaxy had made its choice when it left a 6-year-old girl on a death world. Now Jake would show them what that choice had cost. 1 year after Emma was abandoned, Jake Morrison no longer looked like the man who had once been a scientist. His body had grown larger and stronger from the genetic modifications. His skin was pale and marked with surgical scars. His eyes had turned cold and calculating like a predator studying General Rita Stone gave him his first real assignment in her office on Europa Station. She was a hard woman who ran the most dangerous operations in human space. "We have a problem, Morrison," she said, while showing him files on her computer screen. "Several crew members from your old ship have been talking to journalists about what happened on Zarian. 7. They are making the Coalition look bad." Jake studied the faces on the screen. Dr. Helen Wright, who had first suggested abandoning EMA, Commander Voss, who had supported the idea, Engineer Kim Foster, who had helped build the escape pods that left his daughter behind. "What do you want me to do about it?" Jake asked, though he already knew the answer. "Them stop talking," Stone said simply. Permanently, Jake felt something dark and hungry wake up inside him. These people had voted to leave Emma on a death world. Now they would learn what it felt like to be abandoned in a place that wanted to kill them. His first target was Dr. Wright, who was living on the pleasure planet Risa Prime. It was a beautiful world, with perfect weather and crystal blue oceans. Wright had used her payment from the Starfall mission to buy a mansion overlooking the sea. Watched her for 3 days, learning her routines. The woman lived in luxury while his daughter fought for survival on Zarian. 7. Wright spent her mornings swimming in heated pools, and her evenings drinking expensive wine with friends who thought she was a hero for surviving the plasma storm. In the 4th night, Jake broke into her house while she slept. He used a paralysis drug that kept her awake but unable to move or speak. Wright could only watch as Jake explained what was going to happen. "You voted to abandon my 6-year-old daughter on a death world," Jake said, while packing her belongings into a bag. "Now you get to experience what Emma went through." Jake had chosen Aquanus 4 for Wright because he knew she was afraid of deep water. The planet was covered by violent oceans, with waves that reached hundreds of meters high. The creatures that lived in those seas were massive and hungry. He left Wright on a small island with basic survival gear and a recording device. The woman, who had once condemned a child to die alone, would now face the same fate. Jake broadcast her final messages across the galaxy, so everyone could hear her desperate pleas for rescue. Commander Voss was next. Jake found him on Centauri Prime living in a military retirement home. Voss had been telling stories about the brave crew of the Starfall and how they had made hard choices to save lives. He never mentioned that one of those choices involved abandoning a child. Jake took Voss to Glacier 7, a frozen world where the wind carried ice crystals that could cut through metal. The Centauri officer, who had been so proud of his logical thinking, would have plenty of time to think while freezing to death. Each target was chosen carefully. Jake studied their fears and weaknesses before selecting the perfect death world for their punishment. The crew members who had voted against Emma found themselves fighting for survival in places designed to break them. Engineer Foster, who was claustrophobic, was left in the cave systems of Darkstone, where tunnels collapsed without warning. Pilot Clark, who was afraid of heights, was abandoned on Skyfall, where floating islands moved through deadly windstorms. Jake documented everything. Each death was recorded and broadcast across the galaxy. The messages showed respected crew members begging for mercy, crying for help that would never come. Just like Emma had cried when they left her behind, the Coalition started calling him the Death World Ghost, because no one could track him between kills. Jake used stolen ships and forged identities to move through space. His military training helped him avoid capture, while his modifications let him survive in places where normal humans could not follow. Fear spread through the galaxy as former Starfall crew members started disappearing. Some went into hiding, others hired bodyguards. A few tried to publicly apologize for their choices, but Jake was not interested in apologies. He wanted them to understand what they had done. Captain Nina Blake contacted him through encrypted channels. She was a mercenary who specialized in dangerous jobs, and she had information. Jake needed to know where Lirelei is hiding. Blake told him during their meeting on a smuggler station. The elf has been moving between sacred groves, On the homeworld she thinks the trees will protect her. Jake felt his heart skip when he heard his former partner's name. Lirelei had been different from the others. She had not voted out of hatred or fear, she had voted out of love, trying to save as many lives as possible, but she had still chosen to abandon Emma. What do you want in return for the information? Jake asked. Blake smiled. Free passage through your hunting grounds. I have business in Coalition space, and your reputation is making travel difficult. Jake agreed to the deal. He was close to completing his list of targets. Only 3 crew members remained alive: Lirelei Commander Zara and Chief Medical Officer Dan Rivers, who had been on duty when the votes were counted. But Jake was starting to feel empty inside. Each kill had brought him satisfaction for a moment, before the hunger returned. The revenge was not healing the wound in his heart, it was only making him into something. Worse still, he could not stop. The galaxy needed to learn that abandoning children had consequences. Every parent who heard his story would think twice before sacrificing the innocent to save themselves. Tar the Voidwalker was hunting him now. The alien bounty hunter was famous for tracking down impossible targets. Jake had expected this. Eventually someone would be skilled enough and brave enough to come after him. The chase across 3 star systems was almost fun. Jake had become so much more than human that fighting the legendary hunter felt like playing a game. But when he finally cornered Kestar on the asteroid mining station, Jake felt no pleasure in the kill. You have become what you hunt, Kestar said with his dying breath. A monster who abandons his own humanity. Jake left the hunter's body floating in space and continued toward the elven homeworld. His list was almost complete. Soon, Lirelei would face justice for her choice. Then only Zara would remain. But somewhere deep inside the man he used to be, a small voice asked what Emma would think of her father now. Would she be proud of the monster he had become, or would she be afraid of what her abandonment had turned him into? Jake pushed the thoughts away. He had a job to finish. The galaxy had made its choice when it left his daughter on Zarian 7. Now, everyone would live with the consequences. 18 months had passed since Emma was abandoned, and Jake Morrison had become the most feared human in the galaxy. His campaign of revenge had turned 7 worlds into monuments to his daughter's suffering. The Coalition had branded him a terrorist, while underground movements called him a hero who fought against alien oppression. Jake stood in the sacred groves of the elven homeworld, watching Lirelei through the trees. She looked older and sadder than he remembered. Her silver hair had grown long and wild. Her once bright eyes were filled with shadows. She spent her days sitting by a crystal pool, staring at her reflection as if searching for answers. He could have killed her easily. His modifications made him faster and stronger than any elf, but something held him back. This was not just another target. This was the mother of his child, the woman he had once loved more than his own life. When Jake finally stepped out of the shadows, Lirelei did not run or scream. She just looked at him with tired eyes that held too much pain. "I've been waiting for you," she said quietly. "I knew you would come eventually." Jake studied her face, looking for the woman he had fallen in love with, but that person seemed as lost as the man he used to be. "You voted to abandon our daughter," Jake said. His voice sounded strange and mechanical, even to himself. Lirelei closed her eyes and tears ran down her face. "I have relived that moment every day since it happened. I see Emma's face when she asked why we were doing this to her. I hear her voice in my dreams. That does not change what you did," Jake replied. He felt the familiar anger building inside him, the need to make someone pay for Emma's suffering. "I know," Lirelei whispered, "but Jake, I need to tell you something. I have been having dreams about Emma, dreams where she is still alive." Jake felt his heart stop. The dreams had been his secret, the one thing that kept him going when the revenge felt empty. Now, Lirelei was telling him she had the same vision. "She is in a place with red storms and black rocks," Lirelei continued, her voice growing stronger. "There is something protecting her, something ancient and powerful. Emma is not just surviving, Jake, she is growing stronger." The anger drained out of Jake as hope rushed in to take its place. "You have seen her too every night for 6 months," Lirelei said. She has learned to move like the wind and speak to the storms themselves. Something on that planet has been teaching her, helping her become more than human or elf. Jake sank to his knees as emotions he had buried for months came flooding back. If Emma was truly alive, then everything he had done, the people he had killed, the monster he had become, had been for nothing. His daughter did not need rescue, she needed him to stop destroying himself. We have to go back to Zarian 7. Jake said. Lireley nodded. I have been preparing for months. I stole a stealth ship from the military research station on Titan. It can survive the plasma storms long enough to reach the surface. They worked together for the first time in over a year, planning their return to the Deathworld that had taken everything from them. Jake felt strange being close to Lireley again. His modified body was so different from what she remembered, and her presence reminded him of the man he used to bait. Journey to Zarian 7 took 3 weeks. During that time, Jake told Lireley about his transformation and the people he had killed. She listened without judgment, though he could see the sadness in her eyes when she realized how much he had changed. You became a monster to save our daughter, she said on the last day of their journey. But Emma might not recognize the man you have become. Jake had been thinking the same thing. His body was scarred and modified. His mind was trained for killing and survival. The gentle father who had read bedtime stories was buried under layers of genetic enhancement and military conditioning. When they reached Zarian 7, the planet looked exactly as Jake remembered it. Red storms covered the surface, and lightning split the dark sky. But their ship detected something unexpected: energy readings that suggested advanced technology. The stealth ship landed in a canyon protected from the worst of the storms. Jake and Lireley stepped onto the surface wearing environmental suits designed to handle the planet's toxic atmosphere. They had been walking for only an hour when something incredible happened. Figure appeared through the storm, moving with impossible grace and speed. It was humanoid, but seemed to flow like water around the rocks and debris. When it came closer, Jake felt his breath stop. It was Emma, but she was no longer the 6-year-old child they had left behind. She had grown taller and stronger. Her hair was longer, and her eyes glowed with an inner light that seemed to match the lightning in the sky. She wore clothes made from some kind of crystal fabric that seemed to absorb and redirect the planet's energy. Emma stopped 20 meters away and studied them with eyes that held wisdom far beyond her years. She did not run to them, or cry, or show any of the emotions Jake had expected. Instead, she spoke in a voice that carried the sound of wind and thunder. You are the ones who abandoned me. Here Jake pulled off his helmet. Despite the dangerous atmosphere, his modifications let him breathe the toxic air for short periods. Father and daughter stared at each other across a distance that felt like years. Zima, we came back for you, Jake said. I have been trying to reach you for 18 months. The girl who had once been his daughter tilted her head like she was listening to something only she could hear. The planet told me you were coming. It has been watching you through the storms. A new voice spoke from behind them, ancient and mechanical. Welcome, Jake Morrison. Your daughter has been under my protection since the day she arrived. Jake turned to see a massive construct emerging from the rocks. It was clearly alien technology, but older than anything he had ever seen. The being introduced itself as the Chimera, the guardian of Zarian 7. Your child carries a unique genetic signature. The Chimera explained, part human, resilience, and part elven harmony with nature. When she crashed here, I recognized her potential. She has become something new. Ma stepped closer, but she did not embrace them. You left me to die, she said simply. Her voice held no anger, only statement. A fact I learned to live instead. The storms taught me their language. The creatures showed me their secrets. I am no longer the child you abandoned. Jake felt his heart breaking all over again. He had imagined this reunion so many times, but never like this. Emma was alive and strong, but she was also lost to them in a way he had not expected. I became a monster trying to save you, Jake said. I killed the people who voted to leave you here. I turned worlds into death traps because I thought you needed rescue. Emma looked at him with those glowing eyes. I know, she said. The planet showed me your path through the storms of space. You became what you thought I needed, But I never needed rescue, Father. I needed you to trust that I could survive. The truth hit Jake like a physical blow. All his revenge, all his transformation had been based on his own failure to believe in his daughter. Emma had been strong enough to survive on the most dangerous planet in the galaxy while he had been weak enough to let grief turn him into a killer. Now the galaxy is coming for both of us, Emma said, pointing toward the sky where ships were beginning to appear through the storm clouds. They want to study me or use me or destroy me because I represent something they do not understand. Jake looked up at the approaching fleet and felt the old anger return, but this time it was not about revenge, it was about protection. His daughter was alive, and nothing in the galaxy would be allowed to hurt her again. 2 years after Emma Morrison was abandoned on Zarian 7, the galaxy had learned to fear the name of her father, but now, Jake Morrison stood on the planet where his daughter lived, and faced a choice that would define the rest of his life. Fleet approaching through the red storms belonged to every major power in known space. Coalition warships flew alongside elven cruisers and human dreadnoughts. All of them wanted Emma for different reasons. Some wanted to study her unique abilities. Others wanted to use her as a weapon. Still others saw her as a threat that needed to be eliminated. Obama stood beside the ancient guardian, called the Chimera, and Jake could see. She was no longer afraid. She had become something beyond human or elf, a bridge between species but also a being shaped by abandonment and survival. The storms of Zarian 7 moved around her like they were part of her body. President Helen Carter appeared on the communication screen from the lead coalition ship. Her face was stern, but Jake could see worry in her eyes. "Morrison, you have terrorized the galaxy for 18 months, she said. Your daughter represents a security risk that cannot be ignored. We are prepared to offer you a deal." Jake looked at the woman, who had once signed orders to hunt him across space. "What kind of deals? Surrender yourself for trial, and we will guarantee your daughter's safety." Carter said Emma will be taken to a secure facility, where she can be studied and protected. She will have a good life. Jake felt laughter building in his chest, but there was no humor in it. "You want to put my daughter in a cage, and call it protection? She is not entirely human, or elf," Carter replied. "The genetic combination is unstable and her powers are growing. We need to understand what she has become from another ship." High Priestess Aurora Dawnbringer spoke with the musical voice of the elven leadership. "The child carries elven blood, but she has been corrupted by this Deathworld. She needs healing and guidance that only we can provide." Ma listened to all of this with calm eyes that held ancient wisdom. Then she spoke, and her voice carried across all the communication. "Channels. I am not broken, and I do not need your protection or healing," she said. "I am exactly what this galaxy created when it abandoned a child on a world you thought would kill her." The Chimera moved closer to Emma, and its mechanical voice joined hers. "The girl has become the guardian of the unwanted," she said. "This planet now protects all who are cast aside by your civilized worlds." Jake realized what Emma meant when he looked around the canyon. He could see them now. Other figures moving through the storms, people who had been exiled, refugees who had been turned away, children who had been abandoned like Emma. They had all found their way to Zarian 7, where the storms and the Guardian protected them. "You have turned a Deathworld into a sanctuary," Jake said. With wonder, Rima nodded. "We call it the Haven, Father. This is where the galaxy sends those it does not want, so we made it into a place where the unwanted can become strong, Admiral." Maya Cross interrupted the conversation from her command ship. "Morrison, you have a choice to make. The Coalition is prepared to forgive your crimes if you help us bring your daughter into custody." Peacefully, Jake looked at Emma, who was watching him with those glowing eyes that seemed to see everything. She was offering him a choice too. He could continue his path of revenge and destruction, or he could choose to protect something beautiful that had grown from the worst tragedy imaginable. More ships appeared through the storms. These belonged to the various governments and organizations that wanted to claim Emma. Each one brought weapons that could destroy the planet if they chose to use them. The communication channels erupted with threats and demands. Everyone wanted Emma, but none of them understood what she had become. She was not a weapon or a test subject. She was hope for everyone the galaxy had given up. On Commander Zara Velter appeared on screen from a Vorten battleship. Jake felt his old anger return when he saw the woman who had ordered his daughter abandon Morrison. She said with her cold voice, "You have caused enough death and chaos. It is time to end." This Jake stared at the woman who had started his journey down this dark path. Zara had made the choice to abandon Emma because she thought a mixed child was worth less than pure-blooded. Crew members now, she demanded surrender from the man she had created. "You are right," Jake said quietly. "It is time to end this." He turned to Emma, who was watching the approaching fleet with calm determination. "What do you need from me?" Daughter Rima smiled. For the first time since he had found her, and for a moment she looked like the little girl he remembered. "I need you to choose love instead of revenge, Father. Help me protect this place and the people who live." Here Jake felt something break inside. His chest, the last pieces of the monster he had become, cracked and fell away, revealing the father, who had always been underneath. He knelt before his daughter and took her hands in his scarred one's eye. "Choose you, Emma. I choose the haven. I choose to protect instead of destroy." The first shots came from the Coalition fleet, but they never reached the surface. The planet itself seemed to come alive, deflecting energy beams and disrupting missile guidance systems. The storms grew stronger, and lightning struck at the attacking ships. Seema raised her hands, and the entire weather system of Zarian 7 responded to her will. The red storms formed a barrier around the haven, while the Guardian Chimera activated defense systems that had been sleeping for millions of years. Jake Morrison, the Deathworld ghost, became Jake Morrison, the Protector. He used his knowledge of military tactics and his enhanced abilities to coordinate the planet's defenses. His daughter had shown him a better way to use his strength. The battle lasted for hours, but in the end, the attacking fleet was forced to retreat. Zarian 7 had become too dangerous to assault and too valuable to destroy. The haven was now recognized as an independent territory under Emma's protection. President Carter sent one final message before withdrawing. "You have created something unprecedented, Morrison. This will change everything." Jake stood with Emma and Lirale, watching the ships disappear into hyperspace. The galaxy would have to accept that the unwanted and abandoned could become the strongest of all. Emma took his hand, and for the first time in 2 years, Jake felt peace. "Welcome home, Father," she said. "The storms are finally quiet." Jake Morrison had started as a loving parent, become a monster, driven by revenge, and finally transformed into a guardian of hope. His daughter had taught him that sometimes those who are abandoned can build something better than the civilization that cast them out. The haven grew stronger each day as more refugees and outcasts found their way to Zarian 7. The Deathworld had become a symbol of second chances and the power of love to overcome even the darkest betrayal.